Did you know that where you retire could be one of the biggest financial decisions of your life? And I'm not just talking about weather, golf courses, or being close to your grandkids. And I'm talking about how much of your retirement money you get to keep. And I'm not just talking about your social security income, but your income from your 401k, IRA, 403b, 457, or private pensions, because they're subject to income taxes in most states in addition to federal income taxes. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know I'm a FIRE guy, and I've been on my FIRE journey since 2016, saving and investing aggressively and thinking through every dollar. And I did 20 years in the Air Force, and I've lived in several states and traveled all over the world. But one thing I have learned, especially watching some of my clients retire, is that taxes do not stop just because you stop working. And in fact, for a lot of people, their tax bill stays about the same unless they make a strategic move. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase that taxes and death are the two sure things in life, but taxes are what you can control. Death, not so much. Not yet, anyway. And that's what we're diving into today, the best and the worst states to retire for taxes. And this is not based on opinions, but based on cold, hard numbers. So let me start with this. There's a big difference between a state that does not tax income and one that actually saves you money. You could save taxes on your Social Security in most states, but you could have a higher effective tax rate in the same states with IRA distributions or a workplace retirement plan like your 401k. Now, here's a myth that needs to be cleared up. And a lot of people think that moving to a no income tax state is automatically the best deal. What people don't think about is the higher tax rates in other areas like the property taxes or sales taxes. And currently, there are 9 states that do not tax income at all. And I'm talking Florida, Texas, Nevada, Tennessee, Washington, Alaska, South Dakota, Wyoming, and New Hampshire. And if you've got most of your retirement savings in a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k, this can be a massive tax advantage. However, there are pros and cons to every no income tax state, and I'm going to dive into those throughout this video. Let's take Texas, for example. Texas has no state income tax, but property taxes are some of the highest in the country. And the local governments fund schools and services through higher property taxes. Then you've got Florida, which looks great until you look at how much you have to pay for your homeowner's insurance premium. So yeah, you might save on income taxes, but you could be handing that money right back when it is time to insure your home or pay property taxes. And let's look at Tennessee and Nevada. Tennessee has one of the highest combined sales tax rates in the US. So between state and local sales tax rates, the average is around 9.55%. I still love Nashville though. I miss eating at Hattie B. So if you're watching this from Nashville, go eat some for me. And then there's Nevada, where I've been living for the last 15 years. And Nevada doesn't have state income tax, but the sales tax on average is around 8.23%. Here's another catch you need to know. The car registration fee can be very steep. And when I bought a car in 2018, my car registration fee for a brand new vehicle was around $900 to the DMV. You heard that correctly. It was $900. The Nevada DMV uses 35% of the vehicle's original MSRP as a starting point for calculating registration fees. Then they assess the value with the governmental services taxes or GST. Then there's another supplemental government services tax to assess the value of your vehicle. So without getting into the nitty gritty of the calculation, the registration fees are primarily calculated based on the vehicle's MSRP and age, with additional flat fees to account for the type of vehicle and its weight. So please keep that in mind if you decide to move to Nevada. And Washington, not Washington, D.C., but Washington State was where I lived when I first joined the Air Force 20 years ago as my first duty station. And I was actually a Washington resident there for about 6 years before I moved to Vegas. And while it doesn't come with a state income tax, the combined sales tax can be as high as 10.5%, and the gas tax is one of the highest in the country. Alaska is another popular place to retire, but the cost of living and utilities can be very high. So you have to keep the high cost of living in mind when you retire in a state like Alaska. This is why it's not enough to just Google states with no income tax. You've got to look at the bigger picture. Now, let me talk about a few states that do not get the attention they deserve, but in my opinion, are absolute hidden gems for retirees. And I'll get into the comparisons of the effective tax rates later on in this video. Iowa, Mississippi, Illinois, and Pennsylvania. What do they all have in common? they don't tax IRA or 401k withdrawals for retirees, even though they technically have a state income tax. Let me give you an example. Say you are in Iowa and you're 55 or older. You can pull from your retirement accounts like 401k without paying any state income tax. And they just passed this law that's starting in 2023. So the rule of 55 plays a big role in this if your 401k plan has one in Iowa. And under that rule, you can take penalty-free distributions from your 401k under the IRS rules, which saves you 10% on that penalty. You also pay zero state income tax on the early 401k distributions. So the only thing you have to pay is the federal income tax. But be sure to check with your 401k plan to find out if you have the rule of 55 implemented in your retirement plan. The IRA, on the other hand, doesn't have the rule of 55, but Iowa does not tax your IRA anyway. But keep in mind that you do have to wait until you're 59 and a half to withdraw from your traditional IRA in order to avoid the 10% penalty. Illinois, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania operate in a similar manner. In those states, your private sector pensions, Social Security pension, 401k, and IRA distributions are fully exempt from the state income tax as long as you meet the retirement rules. And keep in mind that the federal income tax still applies in those scenarios. And if you continue to work in your retirement age, the state income tax rates will still apply to those income sources. Like any state, these states still tax more in other areas. Like the average property tax in Pennsylvania is about 1.4%, and the average property tax in Illinois is about 2.1%, more than double the national average. Now, let's talk about the states with the highest effective tax rates for retirees. Single retirees by far have the worst tax rates, but does that mean these are the worst states to retire in? Not necessarily. Let me dive in. According to Fidelity, as a single retiree, the highest effective tax rate is in Oregon, and assuming that you're taking $100,000 in traditional IRA distributions. And that effective tax rate is at 20.41% in Oregon. And as a married couple, you're paying 12.98% in effective tax rate. The second highest effective tax rate is 19.55% in Hawaii for a single retiree. The third highest effective tax rate is 18.91% in Washington, D.C. The fourth highest effective tax rate is 18.63% in Minnesota, followed by Montana at 18.09%, Kansas at 17.98%, Virginia at 17.95%, Idaho at 17.9%, California at 17.72%, and Massachusetts at 17.58%. Remember, this is all based on a $100,000 income from your IRA in retirement combined with federal and state income taxes. The ranking changes a little bit if your tax filing status is married filing jointly, and the highest effective tax rate is still Oregon, followed by Hawaii, Washington, D.C., Minnesota, Virginia, Kansas, Montana, Massachusetts, Idaho, and Maryland. And the lowest effective tax rate is in New Jersey, again, assuming that you're taking $100,000 in traditional IRA distributions. And that effective tax rate is at 13.93% in New Jersey. And the second lowest effective tax rate is at 14.12% in North Dakota as single retirees, followed by Georgia, Ohio, Arizona, Kentucky, Michigan, Maine, Colorado, and Indiana. As a married couple, the lowest effective tax rate is actually going to be in Georgia at 7.81%, followed by New Jersey, Ohio, Maine, Kentucky, California, Michigan, Arizona, Louisiana, and Colorado. So how much do you really save? So let me give you a quick example. Let's say you and your spouse withdraw $100,000 from your IRA in retirement. And depending on where you live, your combined federal and state tax rate could be as low as 7.6% or as high as 20.1%. That's more than a 13-point swing. Now, think about that for a minute. This is more than $12,000 a year difference just based on your state. Imagine what that adds up to over 10, 15, 20 years in retirement. We're talking six figures that either go into your pocket or out of it. Let's do the math. If you're living in a high tax state like Oregon, where combined rates can top 20%, you're losing more than $20,000 a year just in taxes on your IRA. But move to Iowa, you can pay closer to $7,600 total with no state cuts at all. This is $12,000 in difference every single year. Now, I get it. Taxes are not everything. Some of you might say, hey, my family's here, my doctors that I like are here. I like the seasons. Totally fair. And I'm not saying everyone needs to move to Florida or Mississippi tomorrow, but what I mean is knowing your numbers is very important, because when I say this decision could cost or save you six figures over the course of your retirement, I'm not exaggerating. So now let's go one layer deeper. We talked about income tax, but what about property taxes and insurance? Because beyond IRA taxes, there are other things that can impact your retirement bottom line. And Texas, for example, has no income tax, but has some of the highest property tax rates in the country. Same with New Hampshire and Florida. While attractive for income tax, it's crazy expensive on home insurance, especially if you're near the coast. Let me ask you this. How many of you plan to buy a home when you retire or already own one? Drop it in the comments down below. Because if you're factoring this into your retirement decision, you need to include property tax and insurance in the budget, not just income tax. Here's another wild card, and that's your Social Security. Most states don't tax it, but some still do. Colorado, Connecticut, Minnesota, Montana, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, and West Virginia still tax your Social Security income. West Virginia, however, is eliminating its tax on Social Security benefits starting in 2026, so it depends on income thresholds and other factors. But it is something to pay attention to, especially if Social Security is going to be a big part of your retirement income. And this is why I always recommend running a few real life scenarios or actually go to that state and live in it for at least 30 days to find out if you like it or not. And let's say you're in California and you're thinking of moving. Try comparing the total tax burden if you stayed versus if you move to a state like, let's say, Nevada or Iowa. Look at how much you would save annually, then add it up over 10 or 15 years. That gives you the real picture. And I'll say this, run the numbers before you uproot your life. Now, I've seen folks move thinking they're saving big, only to find out their property tax and healthcare costs ate up the difference. It's not glamorous work, but it is the work that makes the difference between a retirement where you feel in control and one where you constantly trying to stretch every dollar. When I decided to stay in Nevada for the long term, being a no income tax rate was a huge factor. The houses in Vegas compared to the other states are relatively cheap and the property tax rate is very low. But watch out for the housing prices because they have really spiked over the last 10 years. And I stayed 30 minutes away from the strip, so I'm not anywhere near the touristy area. My wife and I pay the car registration fees every year, but we managed to pay them because we just put them in our budget every year. And however, weather is a big factor in Vegas. We don't get tornadoes or many storms, but just last year we hit a 121-degree heat in Vegas. I'll say it again. That was a 121 degrees. And if you cannot handle that kind of heat, then Nevada might not be right for you. So before you go packing boxes and heading off to a tax-free paradise, here's one more reminder. Each state has rules around residency. You cannot just spend a few weekends in a condo and claim it on your tax return. Most states require you to live there for 6 months and a day, and they often track things like where you vote or where your car is registered. So don't cut corners here. You don't want to, be hit with double taxation because you try to play both sides. The bottom line is that you should not make this decision in isolation. Run scenarios, talk to a professional, or you can schedule a consultation with me at firesightshare.com/consultation, and I'll walk you through your retirement scenarios. Here's the thing. You worked hard for decades. You clocked in, you sacrificed, and you played a long game. And now you're on the doorstep of a new chapter, one where your money should work for you, not get chipped away by unnecessary taxes. So here's what I want for you. Retire smart, not just frugally, not just safely, but be smart, be intentional, know the rules, look at the real costs. Retirement should be freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, and freedom from stress. You've earned that. And let me know in the comment section down below where you guys plan to retire. Are taxes part of your decision, or is it all about family and comfort? Either way, know your numbers, plan ahead, and take care of future you. You've earned it. And this has been another beast of a video, and I hope you got a lot out of it.